Inspiring interviews with today's top landlords. This is the Rental Income Podcast. And now, Dan Lane.
Ben, do you think that any property can be a good rental?
It kind of depends on what your risk tolerance is. When you're into an investment, are you more of a cash flow guy, or are you more of I'm parking my money in a safe asset that will give me minimal cash flow, but I'll have more opportunity for appreciation and less tenant headaches?
That's a good point. I think you can make money with lots of different types of properties. And I think Ben has an interesting perspective because he owns rental properties himself. He's also a realtor that specializes in working with investors. And not every investor has the same goals. So he's working with investors that have different goals, different reasons they're buying rental properties. And he also owns a property management company. So he sees in real time what's working, what's not working, and which investors are actually making the most amount of money on their rental portfolio. So on the show today, we're going to see if we can figure out what types of properties are actually the most profitable and how we can make the most amount of money and what we should avoid when we're buying a rental property. Joining us on the show today from Edmond, Oklahoma is Ben Scott. We'll take a break to thank our sponsors. We'll come right back and we'll talk to Ben. Time is our most valuable asset. If you don't have enough time in the day, you might be spending too much time on low leverage activities. Things like managing properties can take up a ton of time and give you a very low return. Take your time back and use it to do activities that'll make you more money. I want to let you know about a cheaper and better way to manage your rental portfolio. It's with a virtual professional from Worker Gen X. They can handle repair requests, make sure your rent's collected, help you track expenses for tax time, handle inquiries when you have a turnover. Pretty much everything that needs to be done, they can handle. They do the work. You get your time back. You also won't need to spend your time training your professional. Worker Gen X has employees that are trained and ready to hit the ground running for you. You can find out more at workergenx.com. That's worker, WORKERGENIX.com. Workergenx.com. It's a lot of work to find a really good rental property. And when you actually find that property, you want to make sure you're working with a lender that can get that loan closed. The lender that I recommend is Chaley Ridge from Ridge Lending Group. She's a nationwide lender, and her specialty is helping investors finance rental properties. She has a ton of loan programs, and she can find something customized to you for your situation. If you want to find out more or you're ready to get started today, just go to ridgelendinggroup.com. That's RIDGE lendinggroup.com. NMLS 42056.
Rental Income Podcast.
Ben, I want to pick your brain and figure out what type of property is going to be the most profitable for us. So when you look at your clients as a property manager, what are you seeing as far as the types of neighborhoods that perform the best?
I think when you say which property or which type of investment will be most profitable, I think there's two ways of looking at that. You could look at it at a month-to-month basis or an annual basis, or even, a 10 years or 20 years down the line basis. So a property that can, maybe it's in a C-class neighborhood, you got it at a really good price point, and the rents are maybe 1 or 1.25% of the contract price. But you're going to have more vacancy in that property, less opportunity for appreciation, and you may make more money on that individual unit 6 or 9 months of the year. But long term, if you bought something in a good school district that's a 3 or 4 bedroom house where a family is going to move in, and they presumably rented the property for the schools, and they stay 7, 8, 9 years. Meanwhile, you get cash flow from that. And then you turn around and the property's maybe doubled in value in that 10 years while somebody else has been making your mortgage payment. Oftentimes that becomes the more profitable investment. So,
right.
Every investor is a little different. So I try to ask those questions. Are you a risk taker, or is this more of a play where you're parking your money in a safe investment that will appreciate historically over time? And then you can look back in 10 years and be like, hey, I didn't become a millionaire on the cash flow, but I did on the appreciation.
That's a really good point. And I think something that people don't look at enough when they're evaluating a property, that a C-class property might look really good on paper, but if it's not appreciating, you're not capturing as much wealth as the guy that maybe has an A-class property that's maybe not cash flowing well, but it's going to appreciate more. So
Definitely.
that's interesting to think about it that way. So like how would you, like, say for your personal portfolio, how do you do that? Like how do you compare, or how do you figure out what's going to be a good rental for you?
I think, first and foremost this isn't even anecdotal, it's actual. I have a property on the northeast side of Oklahoma City that we used as an Airbnb. And a couple years ago, we had a big ice storm in October, and power was out all over the city, including our personal home. And, I was like, well, our Airbnb's vacant this weekend, maybe we can go stay there. And, by the grace of God, we pull up and the porch light's on, and the property had power. So we were able, and I had a newborn at that time. So it was even more stressful. But I say all that to say, is it somewhere where I would want to live or be willing to live? Maybe not as a family man, but just even if I was in my single days, would I feel comfortable parking my car there?
Right.
If not, then I probably don't want to invest in that area. There is a place for those type of investors, but I just feel like from a lifestyle perspective, I'd rather invest somewhere that I would potentially be willing to live.
Right. And like those properties in your market, I guess in a lot of areas, if you get into those better properties and the better neighborhoods, they don't cash flow very well. In your area, do those properties cash flow?
No, I mean, so we have, like every city, we have, a lot of the suburbs have the better school districts, and a lot of the families, high wage earners want to live in the city, work in the city, but live in the suburbs so their kids can go to school there.
Mm-hmm.
And so in some of those neighborhoods, you're going to have probably 80, 85, 90% owner occupied versus rentals. But I tell my, investors that invest in those areas, you don't want to be negative cash flow, because cash flow, in my opinion, is built up as a cap reserve to address repairs that will happen down the line. So you don't want to be negative cash flow, but don't look at this as a bad investment if you're only cash flowing $100 a month, because you can build a lot of wealth with singles and doubles. And I think some investors are kind of looking for that grand slam as their first investment property to justify making the leap. So if, something's, Brandon Turner on Bigger Pockets kind of uses the analogy of just, instituting a bunch of little oil wells that dribble in $100 here, $100 there. Mm-hmm. And then you're just kind of riding the wave of appreciation in addition to the tax benefits.
Right.
So, yeah. So with those good neighborhoods, because the price points are higher, your cash flow isn't going to be as good, but I feel like there's a better wealth building opportunity down the line as that property appreciates.
That's true. And then also the rent is going to go up over time. So maybe it's only $100 now, but that could be $500 or $800 in a few years.
Yeah. And there is a market for that. I've had investors say, well, if somebody makes $2,500 a month, or they can pay $2,500 a month to rent, like, why don't they just buy a property? And I explained, well, not everybody has this asset-based mindset. Some people make a really good income, but they don't want the headache of, if the AC goes out, having to fix it. They like having to call a guy or call their property manager to make repairs. They don't like being tied down to a property. They want to be able to only be tied to it for 12 months for a lease, or 18 months, or whatever it is. So there are folks out there who make good money, who can pay good rent, that would prefer to be renters.
Right.
And that's great for investors, because as investors, we are, profiting from providing them housing, but we're also giving them what they want. So I think it's a very symbiotic relationship.
Yeah. And those people make great tenants.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I found those people, they'll take ownership of the home, even though they don't own it. But if you're in a nicer neighborhood and everybody's mowing their yard and nobody's putting a couch on the porch and Kids are playing in the street. You kind of want to keep up with the Joneses in terms of just maintaining the property.
Right.
So yeah, just a lot of benefits to investing in those nicer areas with minimal cash flow.
What do you see as far as the number of bedrooms that are the perfect number of bedrooms to have in a property?
Oh, I like 4-bedroom properties. There's not very many of them. And then B, so since there's less inventory of that, there's higher demand from tenants. So there are families that have 3, 4, 5 kids, maybe a couple dogs. They need 4 bedrooms, and they don't put as much value on a large kitchen and a large living room or even a large yard. They put more value on giving as many of their kids individual bedrooms as possible. So I think anything with 4 beds in a good school district and a nice neighborhood is going to be a sound investment.
And I bet you those tenants stay longer too, because you said, there's nowhere for them to go.
And they don't want to rip their kid out of their school. You
Yep.
know, I mean, oftentimes they moved there because they wanted their kid to go to this specific school. And, they don't want to have to move around to save $50 and then, kind of disrupt their child's life.
Right.
And then, your kids get friends in the neighborhood and some different things. So yeah, those tenants, if you treat them right and treat them with respect and are fair and address repairs in a timely manner, they'll stay decades.
All right. So 4 beds, how many baths would you want to have?
Oh, you need at least 2. And, so I toured this house in a suburb of Oklahoma City called Piedmont the other day and I had a client make an offer on it, and it's kind of right in her wheelhouse. It's 4 beds, 2 baths. 3 of the beds are serviced by a hall bathroom. And then the primary bedroom is serviced by a primary bath suite. Had a smallish living open concept kitchen area, but more of the square footage was devoted to the bedrooms. And so, she likes it because it's 4 bedrooms in a nice neighborhood. And, we think it could rent for $1,700, $1,800 a month. But yeah, just something with that type of layout. Anything more than 2 bathrooms is great, I guess, but not a lot of builders are building homes that are 2,000 square feet with 3 bathrooms.
Right. Now, what about when you buy a property? Do you like to rehab your properties when you buy them so that they're in perfect condition, or do you just deal with repairs as they come up?
No, so it's very smart to be intentional about fixing anything that could break before a tenant moves in. Because you're going to save on the repair costs. Because if you have a guy come over and fix 10 things, it's almost going to be the same price as if he comes over and fixes 1 with the tenant inside.
Yeah.
So, and I counsel this with my owners too. Like, if we have a turn on a unit, let's ask the tenant, hey, is there anything we don't know about the tenant moving out? I mean, anything that you haven't discussed with us that might be wrong with the property? And then let's get that addressed while it's vacant. Just so when the new tenant moves in, there's fewer maintenance calls. And then, if you've ever moved into a new place and the first weekend you're there, the drain backs up and, the lights are flickering, it freaks you out, right? So,
right.
You don't want to spook a potential good tenant by providing them a house that has issues. So get all that stuff taken care of before.
So from what you've seen, the single families are doing the best. They're the most profitable. What about duplexes?
Oh, I mean, duplexes are great. There's not just I'm in the Oklahoma City market, and so there's not a ton of duplexes in our market. And the reason being is, land has been pretty abundant in Oklahoma City for a while. And so builders weren't really incentivized to build small multifamily, given they could just go out and build single family homes in neighborhoods. And then also city governments weren't as open to having a small multifamily built due to some of their zoning. They preferred single family because they wanted, a more of a higher income tax base. I think that's changing in a lot of the municipalities because now cities are valuing density more because they want to increase their tax base. But I say all that to say there isn't as much multifamily in my market.
Okay.
But the ones I have a couple duplexes myself. Pros of we'll just use duplex, for example. Pro of a duplex is you got one tax bill, one insurance bill. If a tenant moves out on one side, you're not going to be as impacted because you have a tenant on the other side paying a portion of your mortgage. Whereas in a single family home, if the tenant moves out, you're getting nothing.
Right.
So you're less prone to vacancy. One, it's not really a downside, just more accounting is most of the duplexes in our market are on one water meter. So while everything else is individually metered for gas and electric, there's often just one water meter. And so I, as the owner, typically pay the water, and then I will bill the tenants a flat rate for whatever that water charge is. But that's just one extra bill to pay.
Now, tell me about the opposite extreme. So, I mean, obviously, the 4-bedroom single family house is your most profitable type of property. What about a smaller property? Like if you look at a 1-bedroom, do those do well?
They do well on paper. And so I manage a quadplex in South Oklahoma City, and it's 4 1-bedroom houses or 1-bedroom units. I helped the guy buy it a couple years ago, and he came to me and he's like, he wasn't working out with his property manager, so he asked me to manage it for him. And when all the units are filled and everybody's paying and there's no repairs, it's great, because he could make $1,000 a month, $1,200 a month. What we found though is the quality of tenant is not as good as it might be in some other parts of the city. There's also a lot more. I liken it to like a camp counselor. So if tenant A parks in tenant B's spot, then tenant A is upset and he's going to reach out to somebody. And so there's just more of that kind of drama when you get into 1-bedroom units. That when people are kind of stacked on each other, living that close together. So to answer your question, I mean, they can look great on a spreadsheet, and there's some people that kill it with 1-bedroom units, but it is a lot more work for both the owner and the property manager.
Now, I want to talk to you about Airbnb. So you had a property that you bought as an Airbnb, but you've since switched it to a midterm. Why did you do that?
So I bought this property. It was by a hospital group in Oklahoma City. So I bought it in January of 20 when Airbnb were kind of becoming the new asset class. And I bought it with the express intention of turning it into a short-term rental. And so bought it in January 20, got it furnished, and then the pandemic hit. So, concerts were canceled, weddings, the marathon was canceled, the arts festival. And so all these bookings that I had canceled, overnight. And so the quality of my guests dipped, around that March, April, May. But Oklahoma was one of the first markets to open back up, and people were eager to travel. And, in 2021 and 22, it was great. I was grossing sometimes $2,100 for a little 2-bed, 1-bath house in Northeast Oklahoma City. But I kind of saw the writing on the wall in 23. Bookings fell maybe 20, 30%, nothing dramatic, but enough to make me take notice. I also noticed in some of the Airbnb Facebook groups I'm in, people were selling their furniture, which indicated that maybe they gave it a shot and it wasn't working out. And, I think this market, along with a lot of other markets, got very, very saturated. And then and then guest expectations changed. Airbnb kind of puts more emphasis on guest experience than they do pleasing the hosts. And so I was already paying the bills, all the utilities. I already had the place furnished. So I pivoted to medium-term rental that caters to people that need anywhere from housing from 30 to 90 days, even on up to 6 months. Maybe they're on a contract employee, or maybe they're just in town staying with a sick relative. Whatever you have it, they don't need a 12-month lease, but they also don't want to stay in a hotel. So they prefer to have a place that's furnished where the utilities are paid, and they'd rather pay a premium, or they're willing to pay a premium for that service. So I quickly pivoted when I saw the writing on the wall to the medium term rental, and it's freed up so much time, freed up so much anxiety. I added up. I paid my cleaner in 22. I paid her $3,000 for one little 900 square foot house, and so it's just I wouldn't necessarily say I'm making more money with it, but the time and the anxiety I have, or the lack of anxiety by converting it to a medium term rental, is like, I can't really put a price on it.
Yeah. I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense. I mean, the Airbnb having just constant people coming and going and the wear and tear on the property, it's like, yeah, maybe you're making a little bit more money, but you're earning that money.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Most of these contract employees, they're hardly ever there. I mean, they're in town for work, and then sometimes they'll go home on the weekends. So they might work a 12-hour shift, come back to your place, and then sleep, and then go back to work. Whereas the Airbnb guest, they're in town visiting family. They have their family over. So all of a sudden, you have 15 people in your house that are kind of there for an experience, and it is a lot of wear and tear on the house. And yeah, that's it. I got a Ring doorbell specifically to just kind of keep eyes on the comings and goings. And people try to sneak dogs in, and I mean, I could tell you dozens of stories, but yeah, just the quality of the guest, given the nature of their travel, tends to be a little better in my experience with medium term rental.
How much are you renting it for?
Well, I had one is renting it for $1,200 a month, so it would probably fetch $850 to $900 if it was just a long-term rental.
Wow. Okay.
And I have another little one bed. It's a one bed part of a duplex, and I'm getting $900 a month for that. I could probably charge a little more, but I knew the lady, so I cut her a deal. But I don't necessarily. The reason I did it was because I already had it furnished. I already put the capital expense to furnishing it. I already had the bills in my name, and so it's not like you're going to make more money than you would with a long-term rental. It's just providing a different service, I feel like. And, you want to diversify your portfolio with everything. You don't want to have all single family or, all short-term rentals, at least in my opinion. So it's just a different asset class and a different way to do it.
Yeah. And I think you're doing well. I mean, getting $1,200 for that one property and then not having to pay the cleaning fees, having that consistent rent that's going to come in every month. I mean, I think you're doing well. Plus, the Airbnb wasn't really an option anymore when the market changed.
True. So, and if you have a place in Joshua Tree or downtown Nashville or a really cool kind of vacation destination where you're providing an experience for somebody, Airbnb can be great. It was just the ones I'm in a pretty unsexy market of Oklahoma City. So people are coming here to visit family or go to the Softball Hall of Fame. It's not a place where people are kind of like, Oklahoma City's not on anyone's bucket list, I guess I'd say, for travel. So, and my places were just kind of your basic little house. And I feel like Airbnb was great while it lasted, but I think the music stopped around 23.
Yeah.
At least in the
And, if things change in the future, I mean, it would be easy to switch it back. So I think being flexible is important.
Yeah, it's already furnished. I mean, all the infrastructure is there, but I'm going to ride this way of doing it for a while.
If you're interested in investing in Oklahoma City and you want to connect with Ben, I've got his information on the website. You can find it at rentalincomepodcast.com/episode 455. I'd like to thank Chaley Ridge for sponsoring today's episode. If you're looking to buy a rental property, whether you're just getting started or you want to add to your portfolio, reach out to Chaley. She has a bunch of different loan programs, and she can find something that'll work for you in your situation. If you want to find out more or you want to set up a time to talk to Chaley personally, just go to ridgelendinggroup.com, NMLS 42056. Thank you so much for checking out the podcast today. I'll be back with a new interview next Tuesday. My name is Dan Lane, and this has been the Rental Income Podcast.